Hi, I'm John Matthews, veteran law enforcement officer, winery owner, and your host for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. Because, of course, we have our in-person version that we do around Texas and around the country. And I'm pleased that you've joined us for this really unique podcast where we feature the fascinating world of serial killers while we enjoy award-winning wine. So why serial killers and wine? Well, the answer is simple. Since I'm the only winemaker in the world to have captured a serial killer. And no, I didn't use wine. So this is real true crime and real wine. And each episode, myself and Brandy Diamond, the popular podcast host of Texas Wine and True Crime, well, where you can also hear on Spotify and all of your favorite platforms, Brandy and I together, we kind of take you on a journey profiling some of the most interesting and intriguing serial killer cases from around the world, while enjoying our favorite wines. How can it be any better? Real true crime, real wine. Now, I've got my favorite Casaro wine today. It's Primitivo, but we'll talk about that a little later. So pour yourself a glass of Killer Cabernet or Murderous Merlot and join us for this podcast version of True Crime and Wine. In this episode, we'll take you on a journey profiling the life and crimes of the charming and prolific serial killer, Rodney Alcala. Now, this guy was a pure lust killer. He was a predator, but he was a sociopath that was so charming, he won his way onto the 1970s hit game show, The Dating Game, even though at the time he had already murdered up to a half dozen women. And after his appearance, the killings continued. He was charged with 8 murders in 2 states, although authorities have since added to that total and believe that his real body count could top 100. So, Brandy, this serial killer really came to the attention of Americans with the recent hit Netflix movie, Woman of the Hour. And we know serial killers can be handsome and charismatic. They're always not that loner sitting in a basement. But here we have a serial killer so charming, he fooled the syndicated television producers. What do you think of this story that we're about to unravel for our listeners?
Hey, John, great to be here again with you today. I think our listeners are going to, well, one, I had heard of this case. We talked about this before we got on here in recording, but you have someone who was able to, again, to be on a very popular show back then, The Dating Game. So we'll talk about that. And again, you have this victim profiling, which we always talk about on every episode. And they differed a little bit in his victims. So we're going to jump into that too. But this guy got away with a lot. He was able to convince people of him and who he was. So he pulled the wool over people's eyes quite a bit.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt that he was charming and charismatic, but I like what you said about victim, and we're going to get into the victim profiling. And so many of our serial killers have a very specific victim profile. They're looking for a certain victim, white, female, brunette, whatever. But in Alcala's case, he was a pure predator, which meant he was on the prowl constantly, and I think that's why you see his victims are all over the board. But let me kind of set up a little background on him. He was born in San Antonio, Texas, 1943, but in 51, so still as a young boy of 8, he was abandoned by his father and then moved to Mexico. His parents said that he was academically gifted and he was popular among his peers. Again, somebody that's charming and charismatic. He did run track and cross country in high school, and at 17 joined the Army. But in 1964, he was released for medical reasons. Now, his records say it was a nervous breakdown, but we know he went AWOL from Fort Bragg. We also know that his commanding officer said that he was manipulative, vindictive, and insubordinate. Now, this is at 17 years old, and that he was disciplined for allegations of sexual misconduct. So, at a very early age, we're seeing superior officers, people that lived and worked with him in the Army, say he's manipulative, and they filed some serious sexual misconduct allegations of him. After his stint in the Army, he was released with an honorable discharge, so he had some benefits, and he applied to the UCLA School of Arts and Architecture. And they say at that time his IQ was 135. So again, you've got one of these serial killers, handsome, charming, manipulative, higher intelligence. Someone that went to college with him even said, oh, he wouldn't hurt a soul. But that didn't last very long. So, Brandy, let me kind of tell you about the first victim here, and then we'll see if there's anything that we can kind of learn from this. The first victim that we know of was Morgan Rowan. She was a 16-year-old female that he picked up at a teen nightclub on Sunset Strip. Now, remember, he's already out of the Army, but he's going to a teen nightclub. And he said he'd take her to IHOP. And so she went with a couple of his friends, but instead of going to IHOP, went to his apartment. Somehow, he talked her into going inside alone while the friends waited outside. He took her in, barricaded the door, raped her, and beat her with a belt buckle that he had handy in the apartment. He choked her with a necktie till she was nearly unconscious. When the friends started to get worried, they banged on the door. Nobody answered, so they broke out a window and helped her to escape. Akala at that time fled the scene, and Rowan, embarrassed because she was a 16-year-old for what she had done going into the apartment with a strange man, never reported the crime until after Akala's death 4 decades later.
Well, now we see this is very brazen. Like, I think about the fact that you're willing to take someone into your apartment, leave witnesses, possible witnesses in your car, in your vehicle. And not only, one thing it would be to attempt the sexual assault piece, right? And then maybe go back to the car and whether that was his plan to actually beat her or to go to that extreme. But we're seeing this very brazen, very, very bold to not care that there's people waiting in his vehicle for them.
He could have easily been caught, right, on the very first time. And to me, this is a serial killer in training. He's certainly already a sexual molester, a rapist at this point, but this is a sexual serial killer in training. He wasn't exactly sure what he was going to do or how he was going to do it. He obviously didn't bring the restraints or anything to strangle her to the crime scene. I doubt he even had it placed around his apartment. I think he grabbed his belt buckle, maybe beat her with it, raped her. And the next thing he found was a necktie that was laying there, and that's how he was going to choke her to death. But he knows her friends are sitting right outside, and yet his impulses still take the advantage of him.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about the weapon of opportunity, right? I agree with you. I don't think he went in there knowing what he was going to do. He had an urge and needed to fulfill that urge, and then whatever that led to. So, but we see a different age group in our next victim, John.
Yeah, and this is really disturbing. Again, as a father of 6, I mean, any child crimes are disturbing to me. But on September 25th, 1968, a passing motorist, Donald Haynes, and he can't be thanked enough, called the police after seeing Akala lure 8-year-old Tali Shapiro into his car and take her to his apartment. Now, Haynes, the motorist, followed Akala all the way to the apartment, so he knew exactly where this guy was taking this young girl. Once inside, Akala raped her and beat her with his steel bar. She was found alive by police who entered the door, but as they were tending to her to try to save her life, Akala fled the scene and he was gone. Poor Shapiro was in a coma for 32 days and spent months and months in recovery. Again, a brazen crime to kidnap somebody off the street. Now, he learned to take her back to the apartment with what he thought were no witnesses. But thanks to this passing motorist, police were able to save this little girl's life. Very different profile already, Brandy, only in the second case we've talked about.
Yeah, we have an 8-year-old, just so terrible. And yes, my gosh. And not only do people witness that, but you don't typically have people follow the person who has just abducted. Typically, people will just call the police, report it, maybe give a license plate. But this person followed, and because of that, this 8-year-old is alive. But yes, we are definitely seeing different profiling. Sexual predator of the, I mean, John, how do you even phrase it? Just you have an 8-year-old child.
Yeah, he's a pure lust predator.
Man, it's just disgusting. But then he goes to New York. Why is he fleeing to New York now?
Well, again, his mistake, he made it the first time, made it the second time, was bringing her back to his apartment. So it didn't take long for police to identify him, and he knew he's going to jail, right? He just raped and beat a little girl almost to death. So he flees to New York to avoid prosecution and changes his name to John Berger. He also enrolls in film school at NYU. And get this, he studied under none other than film director and producer Roman Polanski. Now, he certainly has his own skeletons in his own closet for young women. As many of these pedophiles and many of these sexual predators do, he got himself hired at a place where he was going to be around children. And so he was hired as a counselor at a New Hampshire arts camp. And in a note that I find just absolutely amazing, and we're actually going to bring this note up later on because we are going to profile Richard Cottingham, the Times Square killer. But unbelievably, at one time in New York City at the Blue Cross Blue Shield building, Richard Cottingham, the Times Square killer who admitted to 80 perfect murders, was working in the same office as Rodney Akala. 2 serial killers in the same office. I don't even know what to make of that.
I mean, I don't even know if there are odds for that. Are there, John?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable circumstance. Just so strange.
Yeah, we don't know if they ever met or they knew each other, but just to have 2 serial killers working in the same office in New York City is absolutely incredible. But what I found interesting about this is, like so many sexual predators, he's going to put himself in a situation where he can be around children. So he obviously likes young girls and children at this point, and he was hired as a camp counselor.
He's now putting himself somewhere else, taking on a different identity. You know, do you see that sometimes in serial killers, John? The detachment. Are they detaching from? Are they better now? Is he going to be a better person? Do they ever think they're going? Is there ever a thing in their mind saying, "I'm not going to do that anymore"? Right? I'm now going to move away. I'm going to do good things, and I won't go back to killing. Do they ever tell themselves that to make themselves feel better? Or is there 100% intent to continue this in a different location?
No, I think there's 100% intent. He's trying to get away with it. Why would he have changed his name? You know, he could have gone in and surrendered and turned himself in. He changed his name, fled across the country, California to New York, started a new job, enrolled in school under a different name. He's trying to get away with it. He knows he's a predator, and he's going to continue. And in my experience, when we see serial killers and there's a gap in their killing, maybe a gap of a year, 18 months, 2 years, what it tells me is there's bodies we haven't found yet. they don't stop killing. We know that it gets into their system. They get a high from it. That's where they get their pleasure, their enjoyment, and they continue to kill until they're caught or until they're killed. And so that's kind of the red flag for me. And I was looking into a couple of cases this week, and I saw gaps, and the officers working the cases were, well, did he go out of town or did he leave? That's certainly a possibility for a limited amount of time. I really feel that we just didn't find the bodies during those gaps. So here we see Akala going across the country trying to flee from police. He knows they know who he is.
And now we have a 23-year-old victim, so older than the last two. So tell us about Cornelia.
So Cornelia Crilly, and this is how we talk about the evolution of serial killers, right? He started with what we think a 16-year-old that he took to the apartment. That failed when her friends rescued her. He then said, well, maybe she fought too much. Maybe it took too long. Let me go after somebody younger, weaker, more vulnerable. Went after, an 8-year-old. That didn't work out. So now he's evolving and learning. And how do I get away with it? And his MO is starting to change a little bit with Cornelia. She was a beautiful, sophisticated 23-year-old TWA flight attendant, and she was raped and murdered in her Manhattan apartment June 12, 1971. Akala strangled her with her own nylon stockings, leaving her dead in the apartment. He left her naked on the floor with bite marks on her breast. Those were later matched to him during the trial. She had met him when she was moving into her apartment, and he asked her, do you need me to help you move some furniture? Her murder remained unsolved till 2011. So 30 years it took. And some of the evidence that they tied were the bite marks on her breast and an envelope found under her body with Akala's fingerprints. So to me, here we see a serial killer that's evolving. He's learned he can't do it in his own apartment. He needs to do it in somebody else's apartment. He needs to do it with a female that he sees that he's attracted to, but he thinks he can overpower, and a female that is alone in her apartment. So that's kind of what else do you pick up that he's changing or evolving here?
I almost see and I guess this goes to the mind of is it ever satisfying for them, right? So do they change these age groups on purpose? Is there something he's not getting out of it, or something that he's not, there's some desire that he's not fulfilling with younger girls? Does it make him feel better if they're of age? I don't know. This to me is I can see how investigators, and like you said, that you see this evolving. He's purposely changing his name. He's purposely moving into a different area. He's purposely taking a job to where he's going to be around young girls. And so I see him kind of messy. I don't know if he even knows what his desires really are at this point, to me. So he's a little bit all over the place a little bit.
Yeah, very good. Brandy, you're the true crime whiz. I'm the profiler, but you hit it on the nail. He's a disorganized killer. We certainly saw that in the first two attempts. And now in his first murder, we see the same thing. He's using her nylon stockings, right? It's not something he brought to the apartment. He saw her, kind of found her spontaneously, engaged her in conversation. I'm sure he asked, are you alone? Do you have any help? Is there anybody else around? So he knows he now has her alone in an apartment. He's attracted to her. And I think we see that also in his evolution, that now he's biting him. And the breasts obviously are very, very popular for a number of serial killers that we've looked at over the decades. We see that with him. And as you said, he's very, very sloppy. She might have been holding some of the envelopes that she just picked up from her mailbox. He might have been holding them for her. But in whatever way, his fingerprints got on the envelope that was found under her body. So when they finally got to prosecute the case decades later, it was a fairly easy prosecution, but he is a very disorganized serial killer at this point.
I would agree with that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what makes our show different. We say this on every episode, but John, what are we seeing now with the profiling of the victims, with him moving in a different area? Where do you see him now, and where do you see him going in his crimes?
Well, so we can start to profile a couple of things just off of the first three attacks here. His method of attack or murder is very disorganized. He uses what he finds at the crime scene. In the first case, the belt buckle that he found there. In Tally's case, the steel bar that happened to be in the apartment. And in the last victim, Cornelia, he used her own stocking. So he's starting to evolve his method of murder, but he's still using things right there that he can get a hold of at the crime scene. And I think he's learning, wow, I see a woman, she's wearing stockings, I'm going to rape her, I get her stockings off her, now I've got a perfect weapon to strangle her with. Victim type, he's all over the place. He's a pure sexual predator, 16 to 8 to 23. I think he looks for somebody now that is vulnerable, that is kind of cold from the herd. Brandy, you and I have talked about it almost every week. You know, women that are alone, doing things alone are targets, quite frankly. His weapon of preference, whatever he finds. He's very disorganized. He likes working in an urban environment, though. I think he likes being around the apartments, being in apartment complexes, and he feels that he can blend in and that he can find people that are vulnerable. So that's where his victim pool is coming from. Body disposal, another thing that we profile. He's not hiding them. He's not concealing them. He's not trying to take them and dump them somewhere. He is a sexual predator. Once he gets what he wants, he kills them. And the body means absolutely nothing to him at this point, and he simply leaves them there. So those are some of the things. And if you're profiling along with the True Crime Profiler's Notebook, that's the notebook that just came out last week, and that you can get at our Shop True Crime store. Those are some of the things that I'm writing down in my notebook to try to figure out who this guy is. Now, Brandy, as you know, and as our listeners know, and this is the number one thing that people email me about and talk to me about when they discuss a podcast, they love that we're drinking wine and that they can drink along with us. I mean, what's better? True crime and wine. And on this episode, we're featuring our Casaro brand that you can share with everybody, whether you're watching true crime, listening to your favorite podcast, inviting them to dinner, or going out somewhere. This is our Primitivo. It is a dry red wine and just wonderful. It pairs well with any type of pizza or pasta dish that you make at home. There's absolutely no better wine to enjoy than our Primitivo. It is a Northern Italian varietal grown and made right here in Texas. So it is a great wine. And as I said, it's going to stand up to your favorite pizza or pasta dish. Wonderful, wonderful aroma on it. Great color and clarity to it. It's won a ton of awards, and just really happy about our Primitivo. And as you know, Primitivo we also use in our true crime and wine blend of Primitivo and Graciano. That's how much we think about it here at Casaro. It's not just one wine, it's two for us. So I hope you're enjoying your Primitivo or your favorite wine at home as you're watching True Crime and Wine, the podcast. Salute.
Okay, John. So we know he flees to New York from California. He gets a job at an arts camp. Did anything happen at this camp?
Well, as far as we know, he didn't molest any children there, but in a strange ironic twist of fate. And I never thought these things worked growing up. Do you remember the flyers that they used to post in the post office, the FBI's most wanted? He actually landed on the most wanted list. And his picture was in a post office, and two children from the camp noticed him and told their parents, "Hey, that's our counselor."
Oh my gosh. What are the odds of that? And then you have two people who identify him, two young kids, and say, that's my counselor. And then he's able to go on TV eventually, John. Like, we're going to get into that, but that's wild. Okay, so what happens after he's spotted by the kids? They tell their parents. What happens next?
Yeah, so they contact local authorities. They arrest Akala without incident. He's extradited back to California for the rape and attempted murder of the 8-year-old. Remember Talia Shapiro. But she was so traumatized by the event that her family refused to allow her to testify. And because of that, he was only convicted of child molestation, sentenced to 3 years, but only did 17 months. Oh, my Lord. How many times have we seen this with killers in California that are given light sentences and released and released and released and released, and it's just creating more victims? I go on my soapbox all the time. Law enforcement, criminal justice is not difficult. We have a finite number of offenders out there. If you keep them in jail, you're not creating victims. And our system continues to create victims. And what happened? Less than 2 months after he was released, he was arrested again for assaulting a 13-year-old and paroled again after just 2 years in 1977. Sometimes the system befuddles me.
John, why did they have to have her testimony? I mean, why could they not? I mean, wasn't there enough circumstantial evidence? Wasn't there enough evidence of her being able to maybe identify him, that the eyewitness in this case? Why the testify?
Well, she's a minor child, for one thing, which always makes it difficult. Age 10 is kind of the cut off for knowingly and having culpable knowledge of what you're doing and how it's affecting people and things like that. So when you have somebody under 10, it's really, really difficult. Prosecutors, again, wanting to get a conviction, not really caring about victims, not caring about punishing offenders, pled down to a lesser charge so they didn't have to put her on the stand. Just a horrible circumstance that we see in criminal justice all the time. DAs, prosecuting attorneys wanting to have high prosecution rates go for the low target, and these guys keep getting out, keep offending. And as we see in 1977, he went absolutely crazy with the killing.
And I almost think, did he know he beat the system? Did a piece of him think, I can do this. I'm now going to go and do this even more. They've tried to arrest me. They've tried to keep me in jail. They can't.
Yeah,
I'm winning here.
He beat the system not once, but twice in a row. Twice in a row, he beat the system after beating and raping young children. So now he's got to feel empowered. I can get away with whatever I want. And that's what happens when they release him.
So in 1977, we have 18-year-old Jill. So tell us about Jill.
Yeah, she's a New Yorker that went back to L.A. She wanted to be an actress. Her body was found November 10th, 77. She had been, like the others, brutally assaulted, bite marks on her breast again, that's his signature, and on her face, and she was strangled. And she was just the first in 77.
We've got other victims, and we don't want to say his peak was 77. We talked about this because he had several peaks, but it was just one after the other. So what happened with Georgia?
With Georgia, she was a 27-year-old pediatric cancer nurse, just moved to L.A. and was moving into her apartment, where we've seen that before, right? Same thing with Cornelia. He killed her, strangled her, posed her naked on the bedroom floor, again strangled her with her own nylons, just like Cornelia, sexually assaulted her, just like Cornelia, mutilated her genitals. So now we've seen he's gone from the breast to even more, and he bashed her head in. But again, he's very disorganized. He doesn't care about leaving evidence. He doesn't care about getting caught at this point. He's in it for his own satisfaction, and his DNA and his handprint were found at the scene, which, of course, they would use against him later. But for now, he's got a long runway of killing ahead of him.
We have another victim in 1977, John, Ellen, 23 years old, living in New York City. Tell us about Ellen.
So now we know he's going back and forth, right? And he did that before, went from California to New York and kept going back. And Ellen was 23, lived in New York City, but she was kind of put on the map because of her family. Her dad owned a very popular restaurant in Hollywood, and her godfathers were none other than Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. My gosh, you talk about Hollywood star power.
Right.
And she disappeared after a photo shoot. Now, this is the first time that we hear of him being a photographer, not the first time we've heard of a serial killer posing as a photographer to get his victims away from other people. And as we'll learn later in the case, he had actually been using this ploy for years. We just didn't know about it at this time. But investigators found in Ellen's notebook that she had an appointment with a photographer named John Berger. That was his alias when he was in New York. And they questioned him about it. He admitted to knowing her, but they hadn't found a body yet. She was still a missing person. They had no hard evidence to connect him with it, and they simply let him go. Now, her body was eventually discovered on a hillside overlooking the Hudson River, and later we would discover hundreds of pictures from the exact same spot where he took person after person after person with the ploy of being a photographer. This is a great picture. It'll be a great sunset. I'll make you famous. You know, whatever ploy he used. And we found those pictures, but I guarantee we never found the number of bodies that match those pictures.
I mean, that's unbelievable when you talk about those photos and how many victims there could be that just maybe haven't been identified. And again, just the brazen, and you mentioned not enough evidence, right? You just said with this victim, you know, there wasn't enough to hold him. There wasn't enough. But look what he had just been in jail for, his arrest. Why didn't any of that matter? I mean, couldn't they have looked into this guy a little more? Again, we talk about law enforcement and how difficult it can be to be in law enforcement, but doing your due diligence always. So did they do enough?
But you've got to investigate each crime on its own merits, right?
Yes.
You can tie them together in a trial later on, but you've got to have enough hard evidence at the time to convict these guys, to arrest these guys. In Ellen's case, I don't think her body was found for 3 or 4 months. Yeah. And by that time, the evidence was gone. And again, we're talking about 1977. So the DNA technology and all the technologies weren't near as sophisticated. Matter of fact, we were collecting evidence back then, but DNA really didn't come into its own until the 90s. And that's why you see so many of his convictions decades later. But he didn't stop that in 77. He also killed Christine Thornton, a 28-year-old woman who was pregnant, went missing from a Wyoming ranch. She had been with her boyfriend out there. He was abusive. She left him. She was out alone, basically, in Wyoming, and just the horrible circumstances. Their paths collided, and he killed her. And again, Akala was not even charged with her murder until 40 years later. And this gets back to what we've said several times, and I've seen it with victims. I actually spoke with several people this week. People call me all the time. Hey, can you look into my daughter's disappearance? Can you look into my dead daughter's murder? Yeah, I don't do that. I only do serial killers. I mean, I only have so much capacity or bandwidth or whatever. But I'm always amazed, Brandy, always amazed at a mother's love and how mothers will not give up on their daughters. And nearly 4 decades after Akala killed her daughter, some pictures were put up on a website by a police department, and the mom recognized the daughter from the picture, and the daughter was sitting on Rodney Akala's motorcycle in Wyoming where she was found. So hats off to all those moms and all that perseverance, to not let it go, to stay on law enforcement and to make sure that every clue is, uncovered and brought to authorities so that they can build a case.
Yeah, and it's so many years later, just the relentless pursuit of justice. And as a mother of a daughter, it's relentless. I mean, we do it with school, right? We deal with it at a different as they grow. It's bullying. It's bad breakups. I mean, as a mother, your heart just has this thing for your girls, and the relentless pursuit. John, we've seen it in so many cases when these parents are 30, 40 years old when this happens, and they are now in their 70s and 80s wanting answers for their loved ones. John, I want to talk about the profiling of the forensics in this case. So the biting, part of his MO, part of the forensics, eventually the bite marks, teeth can be taken from that compared to other dental records, and to find out who these perpetrators are. So I want to kind of talk about the wounds on these victims. Why the biting? What do you know about biting?
We know he's a sexual predator, and I think this is just another example of it. He is in it for the sexual climax, and part of that is biting the breast. Sometimes, even cannibalism. We see them bite the nipples, eat the nipples. We see them bite the breast. Very, very common. Bite the pelvic area and the genitals, and that's what he's doing. I mean, he's getting off on the sexual part of this crime, and I think that just confirms that he's a lust killer, a sexual predator, and that's what we're seeing. But he's done this in multiple times now, so that's something that we can put together, identify a pattern, and obviously when these cases are finally brought to court, just like you said, we can use the bite marks, we can use the DNA, we can use the fingerprints and the technology that we have now to tie all these cases together. Because remember, where is he? We've already got him killing in L.A., we've got him killing in New York, in the city. We've got him killing out at the Hudson River. We've got him killing in Wyoming. He's crisscrossing the country, trying to stay ahead of authorities and continue to apply his morbid crimes here.
And so the environment is something else we don't think, not everybody always thinks about this, but now he's moving around. He's moving. He knows he's under, he's committed crimes in different areas. So do they all move around? Do all serial killers, is more, because we always say they dispose bodies where people, I think at least, feel comfortable. They know the area, they know where they're leaving them, but this guy doesn't care. He's just leaving them in the apartment. He's leaving them where he found them or wherever he's taking them, actually. So what do we know about serial killers disposing of the bodies, and is he still being sloppy with this?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of being sloppy, but it's really hard with him to identify a comfort zone, right? With serial killers, we identify their comfort zones. Where do they feel comfortable? It's where they live. It's where they work. It's where they hunt their victims. It's where they dump their victims. And a lot of them have very specific areas, like the Green River Killer, right? He felt comfortable on the prostitute stroll along SeaTac outside of the airport. That's where he picked up most of his victims. And he felt comfortable in the rural area along the Green River where he dumped his victims. So a serial killer like that, we can identify some comfort zones. We can do some geographic profiling. With this killer, it's a little more difficult. Where is his comfort zone? So to me, one of his comfort zones is certainly the apartment complexes. For whatever reason, he feels he can identify victims there. He can make sure they're alone. He can attack them. He can kill them, and he can simply leave them. So apartment complexes is a comfort zone for him. Also, with this Hudson River and all of the pictures that we're going to eventually find later on, that certainly is a comfort zone too. It's an isolated area that he takes the victims to, takes pictures of, and then kills them, rapes them, disposes of them, easily can throw them in the river, never to be seen again. So with this killer, his comfort zones are a little more difficult to identify.
Well, now we're into 1978, John. He hasn't stopped his pursuit in victims and sexual assaults. And so now we have 31-year-old Charlotte Lamb in 1978. Tell us about Charlotte.
Yeah, and Charlotte, again, fit the profile of that comfort zone that I just talked about. She was found dead in a laundry room in her apartment complex. So that's where he's feeling comfortable. She was sexually assaulted. She was strangled with her own shoelaces. Again, he's not bringing restraints to the crime. He's not bringing weapons. He's taking whatever's available at the scene. But with Charlotte, he poses her with her hands behind her back. We did find later on DNA evidence that was collected at the scene was later on matched to Akala, but an interesting thing, her earrings were missing, and her earrings were found later on in the case. And that now leads us to, is he creating another type of signature by taking souvenirs?
So now he's taking trophies of his victims, souvenirs. Do we know what else was found? Do we know? Because this is not uncommon. They want to remember what they did. They want to be able to look at it and it brings back a memory, for them. So let's talk about trophies with serial killers. Is it common? That's a key evidence they're keeping on themselves, right? So are they even thinking about that?
Yeah, no, it's very common with serial killers to take trophies, rings, very common, necklaces, earrings. So pieces of jewelry are probably the most common thing that we see as far as taken from a victim. And the whole idea is you've taken that victim's life. You've had total power and control of that victim. And now with that souvenir, you can relive that moment that you strangled them to death, that you killed them, that you dismembered them. You can relive that over and over again. And when you're interviewing serial killers, it's absolutely crazy to hear the detail, the eerie detail of how they remember every single part of the crime. And what's wild to me is some of these killers really have no idea who the women are. They don't remember their name, even if they told them, but they remember every single part of the crime. I'm so excited about this news. This has been a long time in the making. And today, I'm announcing for the first time our True Crime and Wine Club. Yes, a wine club specifically designed for true crime lovers and featuring our double gold winning crime scene, our True Crime and Wine Red Blend, and our latest edition that'll be coming out this fall, Cold Case. And you'll know it by the murder board on the label. So we'll be releasing several other wines over the next couple months, but we encourage you to join. If you're a true crime lover, you really need to join it, because then we will send right to your door our wine, our True Crime and Wine wines. all the brands come to you. 2 bottles a quarter, no membership fee. You simply pay for the bottles. We ship it right to your door. So if you want to receive and you want to be in the True Crime and Wine Club, just go to CasaroWines.com, CASSARO wines.com. Click on our True Crime and Wine page, and right there you're going to see front and center, join the club. Just follow the little blue icons as you fill out the screens. We'll have you in the wine club and start shipping you your own True Crime and Wine that you can enjoy with Brandy and I as you listen to the podcast. Salute.
Okay, John. So you and I were talking about the movie Woman of the Hour, which was based on Cheryl Bradshaw. So let's talk about Cheryl Bradshaw because she was actually on the dating game at the same time in 1978. And my question to you was, and is, why would a serial killer want to go on national television?
Well, I think that is the height or epitome of narcissism. He's killed so many people at this point and gotten away with it. And now he feels like he's in charge, he's in control, and auditions for the show The Dating Game. And he's handsome and he's charming and they pick him. You know, so when you talk about Ted Bundy performing before the cameras at his own trial, and that's pretty bold and brazen, this guy is going to go on national TV. But let's talk for a second about Cheryl Bradshaw, because she was actually the actual contestant, right? That was hired to be on The Dating Game and pick one of 3 bachelors to go on a date with. So she was a drama school teacher and an aspiring actress, of course. This she thought was going to be her break. She was going to be on The Dating Game and hopefully get more acting jobs. She was selected as the contestant. So you remember the format, a female that was the contestant, and she would interview or ask questions of 3 male bachelors. And at the end, she would pick one bachelor and go on a date with them. Now, when I watched this growing up, I always thought, wow, do they, jet off to an island, or is it some big fancy thing? Now, I found out it wasn't. The Dating Game, you would go to a restaurant or you would go to a local tennis match. It was a public event that people were around. But Cheryl got picked as the contestant, and Rodney Alcala at this time was 35 years old, and he was kind of at his prime. He was tall, good-looking, charming. It was everything the producers wanted. They thought his banter was really, really witty, and said, wow, this is the perfect guy to put as a bachelor on the show. I mean, he's a serial killer. He's already killed probably a half dozen women, not including the rapes, right? Not including the assaults. He's probably killed a half dozen women at this point, and he's auditioning for this national television show. But I think, to me, I don't know. It to me, it's just a wild stretch, but it's not. We see this in a lot of serial killers when we profile. Handsome, charming, witty, charismatic, narcissistic, but they come across as, wow, I really would like to be with that guy, or that's really a nice guy, or that guy's really charming, just like the producers. And so Cheryl picked him. Out of the 3 bachelors, Cheryl picked him over the other 2. Absolutely amazing, and was supposed to go on a date with him. Brandy, give me a woman's perspective on this, because I'm kind of floored. I'm just looking at that serial killer and not this handsome, charming guy. And of course, she can't see him, right? They're on the other side of the stage behind a wall. She's just hearing how they respond to her questions. Tell me.
Did he want to go on a different level and can I actually get a date? Let's see if I can actually fool people, use my personality, knowing who I am and what I do, and let's see if I can get them to fall for it. And he does. He wins. She picks him. But I hope there were some red flags, John, as a woman. I hope after she picks him, there was something unsettling in her that goes, you know what? Maybe he wasn't the right choice. So as a woman, I can only hope that I'm sure it reminds me of the modern, when they're sitting in the different rooms and they have to know each other's personalities. That's a big game show. That's a big show now, but you don't see them. So it is their personality you're picking. And that's what she does. So, gosh, charming. And I think it was just like a one up for him. I mean, imagine what this did to his ego, John.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. You've got a serial killer going on national TV. And what is he saying? Not only am I fooling the television producers, I'm fooling the national TV audience and every cop that's listening. I'm a cold-blooded killer, and I'm on national TV. And not only am I on national TV, I'm picked as the winner. So if you watch the movie, Brandy, there was no restaurant scene. There was no parking lot scene. A lot of that is done for television and for the movies. That's why all those shows are, have the little subtitle inspired by or based on, right? Because it only has to have a little tiny bit of truth for them to take it and run with it. But the reality was kind of what you said a second ago about a sixth sense. And we've talked about that before on this show. She did meet him after the show, right? So she picks the Bachelor and they end the show and he comes forward and she comes forward and they shake hands or hug or whatever. The host says, well, we hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching the show, and cut. That's the end of the show. So at that point, she's just having a little small talk with him. And she could see, yes, he's tall and handsome and, whatever, charming, because he's still being witty, but that sixth sense kicked in.
Good.
She knew something was wrong, and he made her feel really, really uneasy, and she trusted her instincts. She went home and slept on it and said, I can't do this. There's something about this guy. There's something weird. He gives me this weird feeling. She called the contestant coordinator and said, I'm not going on the date. I don't feel comfortable. She canceled the date, and Brandy, she lived to tell about it.
I mean, talk about listening to your instincts. How many times do we tell people, listen to your gut? If you don't feel right about something, don't do it. There might be a reason why your body's telling you that. And thankfully, she didn't go on this date. And John, this made me think, did he go on the show for his own narcissism to see if he could get picked? Or do you think he was looking for another victim?
Oh, I think he was looking for another victim. I mean, how much more high profile could it be than a beautiful woman picks you out of a panel on a national TV show, and you go out on a date with her, kill her, and disappear into the wind? Now, let me tell you, Brandy, I started looking at what did the producers know. I can see how they were kind of conned. We see this with many, many serial killers, and they're so good at it, right? They're pure sociopaths. And as a normal, honest person, you simply don't know how other people could do this to you. But he was just a prototypical con man and sociopath. By this time, he had already murdered 5 people. Producers never checked the FBI most wanted list. He had already been on and off of the most wanted list. He had killed a pregnant mother and her child. He had served time twice for sexually assaulting young girls, and yet the producers didn't know any of that, and he ended up on the show. And unfortunately, I think it continued to empower him, because in 1979 he didn't stop.
No, he didn't. And he goes back to then picking up young girls. We're talking about a 15-year-old hitchhiker in 1979. John, tell us about her.
Yeah, and she was actually featured in the movie too, Monique Hoyt. He picked her up in Riverside and took her to his apartment where he raped her. And then he took her out to Joshua Tree National Park. where he bound her, gagged her, and raped her again. But this is the first time that we know of, and we found out later he did this multiple times. He would rape them, beat them, choke them until they were unconscious, revive them, rape them, beat them, and choke them again. And with this young girl, this 15-year-old, he did it multiple times. Now, I'm not sure that it played out in the movie, in real life, that she tricked him by saying, oh, I love you and I want to be with you. And yes, you raped me in the apartment and you raped and beat and tortured me in the desert, but let's go back to your apartment. I want to be with you. But what was true is they were heading back to his apartment after he had raped and beat her and choked her into a consciousness multiple times. He entered the gas station to go to the bathroom. She escaped. She went for help, called authorities, and she actually got away. But now he knows another victim got away. And again, we see another one of these peaks in his killing spree.
He doesn't go that long until June 13th, 1979, when he attacks Jill. Tell us about Jill.
Yeah, Jill Partnow, 21-year-old. She was on her way to a baseball game, and he picked her up and kidnapped her. She was found dead, naked, of her apartment. She was posed and had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. But this time he cut himself on a window trying to escape, and did leave some more DNA at that scene also. But thankfully, 79 would be his downfall, as he went back to his old ploy that he did years ago about being a photographer, going to a beach, photographing young girls, and telling them, hey, I can make you a model. This time he went and found Robin Samsonow, a 12-year-old, as she bicycled home from Huntington Beach. She was on her way home from ballet class. They found her decomposing body 12 days later in the Los Angeles foothills. She had been beaten, raped, and stabbed with a knife. And her friend said, hey, this stranger came and met us at the beach. He said he'd take pictures of us. He said he'd make us famous, that we could be models. So again, the ploy he used on the older women in New York, 20-year-olds in New York and the Hudson River, we now know that for over a decade, he had been using the same ploy on young girls at the beach and posing as a photographer. Well, luckily, the police were kind of on top of this one. They asked the young ladies for a sketch to identify him. They brought it to a sketch artist. He did do a sketch of Akala. And of all people, Akala's parole officer recognized him and contacted the police. So the first time he was recognized by his picture in a post office on an FBI most wanted poster. This time his parole officer, the sketch comes across his desk and he goes, I know this guy. And again, the officers arrested him without incident.
Well, this is going to be, like you said, 1979 is the beginning to the end for this guy. So what happens after the arrest? They're investigating him. Does he admit to anything? What is his demeanor once he's taken into custody?
Well, now they're starting to tie the cases together. It's 79, so we still aren't very far with DNA. We've got some fingerprints. We haven't tied a lot of these murders together yet. So they do try him in 79 for Samso's rape and murder, and he's convicted and sentenced to death. All right, you think that's the end of it. But the jurors' verdict was overturned because the judge said they had been improperly informed about his sex crimes. Remember how we said we can only try the crime at the time? And so at some point they heard about his past convictions, his past sex crimes. The judge said that was improper and overturned the conviction. Now we have to go 7 years into the future. It's now 1986. prosecutors retry him on Samsonov's murder. Fortunately, he's been in jail the whole time. They retry him, and he's convicted and sentenced to death again for a second time. But it's overturned again because a judge ruled a witness shouldn't have testified and that the police shouldn't have hypnotized the witness, who was the park ranger that found the body. They said that was inappropriate, improper, and overturned the conviction.
He keeps winning, doesn't he?
He keeps beating the system.
He keeps beating it.
Over and over. Now fast forward again, another 7 years. We're 14 years out from Robin's murder. He's retried on the murder in 2003. But this time, they now have evidence from Barcombe, Wixit, Lamb, and Partenow. And he's convicted and sentenced to death for a third time. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It took 3 death sentences to finally stick on this guy.
So now he is convicted, given death. Did they ever know why he did this? Did he like it? Did they ever find out more about this guy after this conviction?
Yeah, the prosecutor said during the trial he was a pure sexual predator. He was a lust killer. He enjoyed hunting women and young girls. And like a wolf or a wild animal, he was always on the prowl. So he was never not hunting. And it didn't matter if you were an 8-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 23-year-old. If he could cull you from the herd, if he felt he could control you and get what he wanted, that's exactly what he did. He ultimately, they started putting more and more cases together, New York cases, California cases, Wyoming cases, and really started getting a picture of how cruel and how sadistic he was. He did plead guilty to 2 additional murders in New York and received 25 to life sentences. Authorities estimate he killed dozens more. Ultimately, he was given death sentences in 3 different states. So justice did catch up with him. Justice did prevail. But one of the things that we find as we uncover this, and each year I tell you, we're getting better with DNA, we're getting better with genealogy, all of those things are helping us tie these killers to more cases. One thing that really sealed the deal on him is at one point from prison, he called his sister and said, I need you to go to Seattle, which we haven't even heard about Seattle yet. I have a storage unit there. It's got a foot locker in it. I want you to get into the storage unit and get rid of the foot locker. Well, of course, every conversation in prison's recorded. Authorities heard it, turned it over to police. They got search warrants. They beat her to the storage unit. They beat her to the foot locker, and they found more than 1,000 photos of women and children in sexually explicit positions, and they were believed to be trophies. Remember we talked about all those photos he took and he kept? And they found earrings. Remember how we talked about earrings being missing? Well, one of the things that they found was a silk bag, and it had Robin Samsonov's earrings in it, and we found earrings and jewelry from other victims. And also with those pictures, I think the authorities, uploaded them to a couple of websites and said, if you know anybody, please let us know. That's where the young lady in Wyoming, her mom came forward and said, that's my daughter. She's been dead for decades. I know it's her, and she's sitting on Alcala's motorcycle. So people would start coming forward, including Morgan Rowan. Remember her, the 16-year-old, the first victim that we knew? Well, she didn't come forward till after his death, but let authorities know about her rape, the murder of Pamela Lamson, the murder of Christine Thornton. And so from everything that investigators have gathered, they think that he may be responsible for upwards of 100, maybe 130 murders.
I mean, John, we're talking about 1,000 pictures that are found And there's probably, 70 to 80%, maybe even higher, of people not even identified in those photos. I mean, that just gave me goosebumps just to think of how many, not even only just the people he murdered, but the people that he ruined their lives, sexual assaulting them, kidnapping them, abusing them. I mean, this guy was relentless. And
Yeah.
thankfully he was caught. Thankfully he was put in prison, and this came to an end. But my God, it's just terrible.
And how many other women did he just leave in the desert, right? To be found weeks, months later? How many other women in the foothills? The women in the apartment, obviously they're going to be found quickly. How many women might he have thrown into the Hudson River, right?
Yeah.
And never were found. Their bodies were never identified. Maybe they were never reported as missing. So, I certainly agree. His victim count could easily exceed 100 victims. This guy, the movie did not do it justice in portraying what a horrible, evil, sadistic serial killer, lust killer Rodney Alcala was. He finally died at 77 years old, still not put to death. He died of natural causes, but I just hope he had a miserable, miserable life from when he went to prison to when he finally died, for the misery that he caused all of those women out there all across the country. Now, Brandy, as we put a cork in this edition of our True Crime and Wine podcast, I want to remind the listeners that we have our new True Crime Profiler's Notebook out on the website at Shop True Crime so that you can profile along with Brandy and I. We have our new True Crime Wine Club. You can find it Casaro Wines, and you can drink with Brandy and I on the show listening to the podcast. Of course, I want to thank my co-host, Brandy Diamond, for joining me on this journey, and our producer, Lauren Bedsole, back in the Corsicana Command Center, for helping to make this show possible. And we'll see you on the next episode of True Crime and Wine when we present The Purgatory Killer, a sociopath so charming that he charmed the academic community and high society to such a degree that he gained early release from prison on a murder charge, only to go out and kill again while he was attending these social affairs with distinguished celebrities. A fascinating case. As always, we try to find the unique and fascinating serial killers and profile them for you on True Crime and Wine. I'm John Matthews. Thanks for joining us on True Crime and Wine, and salute.